My name is Sophia Chen. I just turned 19, and for the past 10 years, I believed I was the reason my mother got hurt. Every bruise, every broken bone, every trip to the emergency room, my father made sure I knew it was my fault. "Look what you made me do to her," he would say, standing over my crying mother while I shook with guilt. "If you had just been better, this would not have happened." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word until the cameras showed me the truth. It started when I was 8 years old. I had gotten in trouble at school for talking during silent reading time. It was nothing serious, just a note sent home that required a parent's signature. When Dad read it, his face went dark in that way that made my stomach drop. "Sophia," he said, his voice deadly calm, "go to your room." I went, grateful to escape whatever storm was brewing. But 20 minutes later I heard it, the sharp crack of impact, my mother's cry, the sound of something breaking. I ran downstairs to find Mom on the floor, holding her arm, Dad standing over her. "This is because of you," he said, looking directly at me. "Your mother has to pay for your mistakes. She failed to raise you properly, so she gets punished when you misbehave. Do you understand?" Mom looked at me through her tears and nodded. "It is okay, baby. It is not your fault." But Dad grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "Do not lie to her. She needs to understand the consequences of her actions." He looked at me again. "Every time you disappoint me, disappoint this family, your mother suffers. Remember that." From that day forward, I lived in terror, not of being hurt myself, but of causing my mother's pain. I became obsessed with perfection. Straight A's were not good enough if there was not a plus after them. I joined every extracurricular activity that might make him proud. I never talked back, never broke curfew, never did anything that could trigger his anger. But it did not matter. Mom still got hurt. "You were 3 minutes late from school today," he would say, and Mom would end up with a black eye. "Your teacher says you could participate more in class discussions," and Mom would have bruised ribs. "You forgot to take out the trash," and Mom would be limping for a week. Each time, he made sure I saw the aftermath. He would call me into whatever room Mom was crying in and explain in detail how my failings had led to this moment. He had a gift for it, really, taking the smallest infraction and building a narrative where I was the catalyst for violence. "Your mother and I were having a perfectly pleasant evening," he would say, "until I remembered how you had embarrassed our family at the school concert by missing that note in your violin solo. The shame of it, Sophia. The shame you brought on us. Your mother tried to defend you, which made it worse. She would not be hurt if you had just practiced more, been better, been the daughter we deserve." Mom never contradicted him. Sometimes she would try to comfort me, tell me it was not my fault when he was not around, but even she seemed to believe there was a connection. "Just try to be good," she would whisper, hugging me with whatever arms were not injured. "For both our sakes, just be good." So I tried. God, how I tried. I was the perfect daughter on paper, valedictorian track, volunteer work, part-time job, never a moment of trouble. But the violence never stopped. If anything, it got worse as I got older, as if my father needed to escalate to maintain the same level of psychological control. By the time I was 16, I had developed severe anxiety and an eating disorder. I could not eat when Mom had visible injuries, which was most of the time. I lost 30 pounds in 6 months, and when the school counselor expressed concern, Dad used that as another reason to hurt Mom. "Now you are making people think we are bad parents," he said, Mom's face already swelling from the first blow. "Is that what you want? To destroy our reputation?" The thing about gaslighting, and I know that is what it was now, though I did not have the word for it then, is that it rewrites reality so thoroughly that you cannot trust your own perceptions. Even when logic told me that my 8-year-old self talking in class should not result in my mother's broken wrist, the emotional conditioning was stronger. Dad was so certain, so consistent in his narrative that it became my truth. He was clever about it, too. He would sometimes go weeks without hurting her, and during those periods, he would praise me. "See how happy our family is when you behave," he would say. Your mother has not had a single accident since you got that perfect report card. You are keeping her safe, Sophia. Remember that. Then, inevitably, I would do something, score a 98 instead of 100, laugh too loudly at dinner, wear a skirt he deemed too short, and the cycle would begin again. You were doing so well, he would sigh, standing over Mom's crumpled form. I thought you had finally learned. But you are selfish, are you not? You do not care about your mother's well-being. The manipulation was so complete that I started hurting myself as punishment. If my imperfection caused Mom's pain, then I deserved pain too. I would dig my nails into my palms until they bled during tests, thinking if I suffered enough, maybe Mom would be spared. I would deny myself food, sleep, comfort, anything that might somehow balance the cosmic scale my father had created in my mind. Mom knew about the self-harm. She found the scars one day when I was changing clothes, and she broke down completely. No, baby, no, she sobbed, holding me. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. But then Dad came home, saw her crying, saw my scars, and the narrative shifted again. You are hurting yourself to manipulate us, he said coldly. To make us feel guilty. Your mother is hysterical because of your attention-seeking behavior. Is this what you wanted? That night, Mom ended up in the hospital with a concussion. Dad told the doctor she had fallen down the stairs, and when they asked me if that was true, I nodded. What else could I do? Telling the truth would only make him angrier, and Mom would pay the price. Turning point came just after my 18th birthday. Dad had been particularly volatile that week. Mom had a split lip, bruised ribs, and a black eye she was trying to cover with makeup. I had been racking my brain trying to figure out what I had done wrong, what transgression had triggered this latest violence. It is because you are thinking about college, Dad said over dinner, as if reading my mind. Talking about leaving us, abandoning your family. Your mother is heartbroken, and when I tried to comfort her, she got emotional. You see what your selfishness causes. But something about that did not sit right. I had not talked about college at home in weeks, specifically to avoid this kind of reaction. I had been doing all my college planning at school with my counselor. There was no way Mom was upset about something she did not even know about. For the first time in 10 years, a crack appeared in the reality my father had constructed. I started paying closer attention, looking for inconsistencies. Dad said he hurt Mom because I had been rude to him that morning, but I had left for school before he even woke up. He said it was because I had embarrassed him at church, but we had not been to church in months. He said it was because I had failed a test, but I had not taken any tests that week. The more I looked, the more the story fell apart. Then came the day that changed everything. I was at school in my AP biology class when I had a panic attack. Not unusual for me, but this one was particularly bad. The nurse called my parents to pick me up, but neither answered. I eventually calmed down and returned to class, thinking nothing of it. When I got home that afternoon, Mom had a fresh black eye. This is because of your panic attack, Dad said immediately. The school called and interrupted your Mother's Day. She got upset about your mental weakness, and I had to calm her down. But I had been there when the nurse called. I had heard her leave messages on both their phones. If Mom had been hurt because of that call, it would have happened while I was at school, not before. Which meant, when? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop it. What? Dad's eyes narrowed. When did this happen? When exactly did you have to calm her down? His face went red. Are you questioning me? No, I want to understand the timeline so I can avoid. It happened when it happened, he snapped. The exact time does not matter. What matters is that your behavior caused it. But the exact time did matter, I realized. Mattered because if he was lying about when it happened, he might be lying about why. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Mom had been hurt while I was at school, at work, at activities. How did my behavior cause violence when I was not even there? How did my failures trigger his anger hours after they supposedly occurred? I needed to know the truth. The next day, I used my birthday money to buy a set of small, wireless cameras online. They were marketed for home security, barely bigger than a quarter, with motion activation and cloud storage. I told myself I was just going to observe, to understand the pattern, to figure out how to better protect Mom. Installing them was terrifying. I chose times when Dad was at work and Mom was grocery shopping. One in the living room, hidden in a bookshelf. One in the kitchen, tucked behind the coffee maker. One in the hallway, positioned to see their bedroom door. One in the garage, where many of their discussions happened. For the first week, nothing happened. Dad was in one of his calm periods, the eye of the storm where he played the loving husband and father. Mom's bruises faded. We had family dinners where he asked about my day and seemed genuinely interested. These were the times that made the violence feel like a bad dream, like maybe I had imagined it all. But I knew better. I had lived this cycle too many times. Cameras captured normal life, Mom cooking, Dad watching TV, mundane conversations about bills and schedules. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was the problem, creating drama where none existed. Then Tuesday happened. I was at school in my calculus class working through derivatives. My phone, on silent in my backpack, was recording everything happening at home. 10:47 a.m. While I was solving for X, my father was supposed to be at work. Instead, the living room camera captured him coming home. Mom was vacuuming, earbuds in, unaware of his presence until he grabbed her from behind. She screamed, startled, and he spun her around. "You did not answer my text," he said. I did not hear it over the vacuum. The slap was so hard she fell into the coffee table. He stood over her, calm as always, and said, "Sophia got a B on her history quiz yesterday. She is getting lazy, unfocused." Like mother, like daughter. Mom was crying, holding her face. She did not tell me about any quiz. Because she is ashamed. As you should be. You have failed as a mother, raising such a disappointment. He hit her again. And again. All while I sat in calculus, completely unaware, working through problems and thinking about lunch. Timestamp showed 10:52 a.m. when he finally stopped, leaving Mom crumpled on the floor. He straightened his tie, checked his appearance in the mirror, and said, "Clean yourself up before Sophia gets home. She needs to understand that her failures have consequences." He left, presumably returning to work. Mom lay there for another 10 minutes before slowly getting up, limping to the bathroom. The camera caught her practicing in the mirror. "Sophia, honey, I fell." It was silly of me. You know how clumsy I am. I watched this footage that evening, locked in my bedroom, and threw up in my trash can. Then I kept watching. 2:15 p.m. that same day, while I was in my history class ironically discussing the dynamics of power and oppression, he came home again. This time, he found Mom in the kitchen making lunch. "I have been thinking about Sophia's college applications," he said conversationally, before grabbing Mom's wrist and twisting it behind her back. "She is applying to schools too far away. She is trying to abandon us. She has not even submitted any applications yet," Mom gasped through the pain. "But she is thinking about it. I can see it in her ungrateful little face. She wants to leave us, and you are encouraging her." He pushed her face first into the refrigerator, and the sound her nose made when it connected with the metal made me gag even hours later. Blood immediately started flowing. "When she gets home," he said, still holding her against the fridge, "you will tell her that you are hurt because she is being selfish about college. You will tell her that her desire to leave is breaking your heart. Make her believe it, or next time will be worse." Mom nodded frantically, blood dripping onto the floor. He released her and watched as she grabbed paper towels for her nose. "And Maria? Make sure she sees you crying." Sophia responds well to guilt. I paused the video and ran to the bathroom, dry heaving over the toilet. 10 years. 10 years of believing I was the cause, and it was all a performance. Every single time, he had hurt her and then crafted a story to make me responsible. But I needed to see more. I needed to understand the full scope of the deception. Over the next month, I watched and cataloged everything. Pattern was consistent and horrifying. He would come home at random times during my school hours while I was at work when I was at volunteer activities. He would hurt Mom for any reason or no reason at all. The house was too clean, not clean enough, dinner was planned for too early, too late, she looked too nice, not nice enough. And every single time, he would create a connection to me. Sophia's attitude this morning was disrespectful. Sophia's grades are slipping. They were not. Sophia looked at me wrong yesterday. Sophia is becoming too independent. Sophia does not appreciate us enough. Then he would coach Mom on what to say, how to present her injuries, how to make me feel responsible. Sometimes he would literally rehearse the conversation with her, making her repeat the words until they sounded natural. "No, not like that," he said in one video after breaking her finger. "You need to sound more disappointed, less angry." "Say it again." "Sophia, I got hurt because I was so upset about your behavior." "Put emphasis on your behavior. Make her feel it." Mom would practice, tears streaming down her face, until he was satisfied with her performance. The psychological torture was meticulous. He had notebooks where he tracked my activities, my moods, my achievements and failures. He would study them like a scientist planning an experiment, deciding which violence to attribute to which of my actions for maximum psychological impact. One video showed him on the phone with someone, a colleague I think, laughing about a golf game, completely normal, while Mom was visible in the background, limping from the beating he had given her an hour earlier. "Kids, right?" he said into the phone. "Sophia's been acting up lately. Teenage girls, you know how it is. Her mother's beside herself." Casualness of it, the way he could switch from violent abuser to concerned father in seconds, was chilling. I found videos of him practicing his disappointed father face in the mirror. Videos of him timing how long bruises took to form so he could plan when to hurt Mom based on when I would be home. Videos of him researching child psychology websites to better understand how to manipulate me. In one particularly horrifying clip, he was on the phone with my pediatrician when I was younger, describing my behavioral issues that did not exist, setting up a paper trail that made me look like a problem child in case anyone ever questioned the family dynamic. But the worst video was from 3 weeks into my surveillance. I was at my part-time job at the library when he came home at 3 p.m. Mom was in the bedroom, folding laundry. "Sophia is getting suspicious," he said without preamble. "She asked about timing the other day." Mom looked terrified. "She is smart, Dan. She has always been smart. Maybe we should." "Should what?" "Tell her the truth? That I hurt you because I enjoy it? Because I can? Because you are weak and pathetic and deserve it?" "No, I just meant." He grabbed her throat. "The story stays the same. Sophia is responsible. Keeps her in line, keeps her from getting too confident, too independent. A guilty child is a compliant child." "She is hurting herself," Mom whispered. "She cuts herself because she thinks." "I know what she thinks." "That is the point. The self-harm is just proof the system works. She punishes herself so I do not have to. It is efficient." My mother started crying harder. "She is our daughter. How can you?" "She is a means to an end. Controlling her controls you. You will not leave because you think it will destroy her to know the truth. She will not challenge me because she thinks protecting you means perfect obedience. It is a beautiful system, really." He released her throat and straightened his shirt. "Besides, in a few months she will leave for college, and then I will not need the pretense anymore. It will just be you and me, and I will not have to justify anything." The look of horror on my mother's face was something I will never forget. She had been complicit in the lie, yes, but I realized she had also believed parts of it. She had thought there was some connection between my behavior and his violence, some twisted logic that, if followed, could keep her safe. Learning it was entirely fabricated, entirely cruel manipulation broke something in her. Now, Dad continued, Sophia got an A- on her English paper yesterday. I think that deserves consequences, do you not? The beating that followed was one of the worst I had recorded. And when I got home from work 2 hours later, Mom performed exactly as instructed, telling me through tears that my imperfect grade had disappointed Dad so much that he had taken it out on her. I played my part perfectly, apologizing, promising to do better, hating myself for causing her pain, all while knowing the truth was sitting in cloud storage, waiting. For 2 weeks after that revelation, I could barely function. I went through the motions of daily life, school, work, home, but inside I was screaming. Every interaction with my father was torture. When he expressed disappointment in me, I wanted to throw the videos in his face. When he comforted my crying mother while explaining how my behavior had forced him to hurt her, I bit my tongue so hard it bled. But I needed more evidence. I needed enough to ensure he could not talk his way out of it, could not convince police or judges that it was a misunderstanding. So I kept recording. The cameras captured 53 separate incidents over 2 months. 53 times he hurt my mother while I was not home. 53 elaborate lies he constructed to make me responsible. The violence ranged from slaps to strangulation, from twisted arms to cracked ribs. And every single time, he made sure to create a narrative that centered on my failures. He had notebooks dedicated to this psychological torture. Pages and pages of plans. Tuesdays has violin recital. Create fight about her dress choice before she leaves. Hit M during recital. Blame on embarrassment about S's appearance. Thursday S working 4 to 9. Come home at 5, deal with M's attitude about money. Frame as S's college expenses causing stress. Saturday S at volunteer shift. Punishment for her tone at dinner Friday. Note, make sure S uses tone at Friday dinner. He was creating my sins in advance, planning violence around them, choreographing an elaborate performance where I was always the villain and he was just a father pushed too far by a difficult daughter. I also found videos from years earlier that my cameras did not capture but that he had recorded himself on his phone and laptop. Videos of him hurting Mom when I was in elementary school, with him narrating, "This is because Sophia failed her spelling test." Videos from when I was in middle school. Sophia talked back to her teacher today. He had been documenting his own abuse, creating a twisted archive of false causality. In one old video from when I was 12, he was explaining to the camera to some imagined audience or maybe just to himself his philosophy. Children need to understand consequences, not just for their own actions, but for how their actions affect others. Sophia learns empathy through her mother's pain. It is more effective than any other form of discipline. The narcissism of it, the pseudo-intellectual justification for torture, made me physically ill. I started planning my response. I could not just go to the police with videos. I had learned from researching online that evidence obtained without consent could be problematic legally. But I could use what I knew to protect Mom and expose him. First, I needed Mom safe. I reached out to a domestic violence shelter in the next town over, explaining the situation without mentioning the cameras. They helped me create an exit plan, important documents gathered, secret bank account established, safe place to go when ready. Then I started documenting everything legally. I took photos of Mom's injuries with her permission, though she did not know about the videos. I kept a journal of every incident, every lie, every manipulation. I recorded him with my phone when he was lecturing me about my failures, capturing his voice explaining how my behavior forced him to discipline Mom. I also started therapy secretly, using my job money to pay for sessions. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, was the first person I told about the videos. "Sophia," she said gently, "what you have discovered is evidence of severe psychological and physical abuse. Your father is a dangerous man who has been torturing both you and your mother for years." "But I participated," I said, sobbing. "I believed him. I hated myself. I hurt myself because of his lies." "You were a child," she said firmly. "A child who was systematically programmed to believe a false narrative. This is not your fault. None of it has ever been your fault. She helped me understand terms I had never heard before: gaslighting, trauma bonding, coercive control. She explained how abusers like my father create elaborate systems of control that trap their victims in psychological prisons. Your father is particularly sophisticated, she said, using you as both weapon and victim, making your mother complicit in her own abuse, creating a circular logic where questioning the narrative would cause more harm. It is diabolical. With Dr. Martinez's help, I started deprogramming myself. Every time I felt guilt about Mom's injuries, I would watch the videos that showed the truth. Every time I believed I was responsible, I would read his planning notebooks. It was brutal, re-traumatizing myself over and over, but necessary to break the hold he had on my mind. The breaking point came on a Thursday in November. I had gotten into Yale early admission, my dream school, full scholarship, everything I had worked for despite the chaos at home. I had not told my parents yet, afraid of how Dad would react. But somehow he found out. Maybe he had been checking my email, or maybe the school had called the house. Either way, when I got home from school, Mom was in the hospital. Your selfishness has gone too far, Dad said when I walked in. He was sitting calmly at the kitchen table, Mom's blood still on his knuckles. Yale? You accepted without discussing it with us? Your mother was so devastated she became hysterical. I had to call an ambulance. I knew it was a lie. Cameras would show what really happened. But for the first time, I did not care about maintaining the facade. You are lying, I said quietly. He went very still. What did you say? You are lying. I know you hurt Mom while I was at school. I know it had nothing to do with Yale. I know it has never had anything to do with me. His face went through several expressions: surprise, calculation, rage. Then, terrifyingly, he smiled. Prove it, he said simply. Who would believe you? The troubled girl with the self-harm scars and eating disorder? The attention-seeking teenager who has been in therapy for behavioral issues since she was 8? I have years of documentation about your problems, Sophia. Your mother will say whatever I tell her to say. So prove it. That is when I played my first card. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo, him clearly visible striking Mom with a timestamp from when I was verifiably at school. I have 53 videos, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. All dated, all time-stamped, all showing you hurting Mom while I was not home. I have videos of you coaching her on what to say. I have videos of you explaining your system of control. I have your notebooks where you plan the violence in advance. His face went white, then red, then purple with rage. He stood up, and for the first time in my life, I thought he might hit me directly. You little bitch, he snarled. You spied on me? In my own home? Our home, I corrected. And I was protecting Mom. Those videos are illegal. Recorded without consent. They are worthless. Maybe in court, I agreed. But not on YouTube. Not on Facebook. Not sent to every single person at your company, your golf club, your church. Imagine everyone you know seeing the real Daniel Chen. Not the successful businessman, but the pathetic man who beats his wife and psychologically tortures his daughter. He lunged at me then, but I was ready. I had my finger on the emergency call button on my phone, and the moment he moved, I pressed it. The 911 operator heard everything. His threats, his admission, the sound of furniture breaking as I dodged his grab. This is Sophia Chen at 4827 Maple Drive, I said loudly as he cornered me in the kitchen. My father, Daniel Chen, is attacking me. He has already sent my mother to the hospital. Please send police immediately. You ungrateful, he grabbed my wrist, trying to get my phone. He is assaulting me right now, I continued, keeping my voice clear for the recording. He is grabbing me. He has admitted to systematically abusing my mother for years. The sound of sirens made him freeze. He released me and stepped back, his businessman mask sliding back into place. This is a misunderstanding, he said, straightening his tie. Sophia is having one of her episodes. She is mentally unstable, self-harms, has an eating disorder. Check her medical records. But when the police arrived, I was ready. I showed them the photo on my phone. I told them about Mom in the hospital. I gave them Dr. Martinez's contact information, who had been prepared for this moment. And most importantly, I told them about the notebooks. He documents his plans, I said as they handcuffed him. Check his office. Top drawer of his desk. Notebooks full of premeditated abuse. They found them, of course. And while the videos I had taken might have been questionable legally, his own notebooks and his own handwriting detailing planned violence, that was admissible. That was damning. Mom survived, though she had a ruptured spleen and internal bleeding. When I showed her the videos in the hospital, she broke down completely. I knew it was wrong, she sobbed. I knew it was not your fault. But I thought if I played along, if I made you believe it, he would not hurt you directly. I thought I was protecting you. He was never going to hurt me directly, I said, holding her hand. I was more valuable as a weapon. Hurting me through you, making me complicit in your abuse, that was the point. The trial was a media sensation. Father's decade-long psychological torture exposed by daughter's hidden cameras. The videos could not be used as primary evidence, but they provided context for everything else: the notebooks, the medical records, the testimony from teachers who had noticed my declining mental health, the therapist who confirmed my father had been creating false behavioral issues since I was 8. Dad tried to maintain his story at first, claiming I was a troubled teen making things up for attention. But when prosecutors presented his notebooks, his own words planning violence and psychological manipulation, his defense crumbled. Several of his colleagues came forward, admitting they had suspected abuse but had been too afraid of his temper to intervene. He was convicted on multiple counts of assault, domestic battery, and child abuse. The judge, a woman who had clearly seen too many cases like ours, gave him the maximum sentence possible, 15 years, with no possibility of early release. Mr. Chen, she said at sentencing, in 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such calculated, deliberate cruelty. You did not just physically abuse your wife. You created an elaborate psychological torture chamber where your daughter was both prisoner and unwitting accomplice. The damage you have done to both these women is immeasurable. Dad maintained his innocence until the end, claiming we had conspired against him, that I had manipulated the evidence, that Mom was lying to get a divorce settlement. Even faced with his own handwritten plans for abuse, he insisted it was taken out of context. Mom and I moved across the country after the trial, using the Victim Support Fund to start over in a place where no one knew our story. I deferred Yale for a year to focus on recovery, on helping Mom reclaim her life, on learning who we were without the constant shadow of violence and manipulation. Therapy was brutal but necessary. Dr. Martinez connected us with a specialist in complex trauma who worked with both of us, together and separately. I had to unlearn a decade of false beliefs, reprogram my brain to stop taking responsibility for things that were never my fault. Your father weaponized your empathy, our therapist explained. He took your natural love for your mother and turned it into a tool of control. Healing means reclaiming that empathy without the false guilt attached. Mom struggled with her own complicity. The fact that she had participated in the lie, repeated his narratives, made me believe I was responsible. The guilt was eating her alive. I failed you, she would say over and over. A mother is supposed to protect her child, and I let him use you to hurt both of us. You were a victim too, I reminded her. You were trying to survive with the tools you had. We both were. Recovery was not linear. I would have good days where I felt strong and clear, then bad days where the old programming would kick in and I would feel guilty for putting Dad in prison, for destroying our family, for not being the perfect daughter who could have somehow prevented all of this. Mom had her own struggles. After years of being controlled, making decisions was overwhelming. Choosing what to have for dinner could send her into a panic attack. She had to learn, slowly, how to exist as an autonomous person. We both had nightmares. Mine were usually about discovering that everything had been my fault after all, that the videos were fake, that I had imagined the whole thing. Mom's were about Dad getting out of prison, finding us, finishing what he had started. But slowly, incrementally, we healed. I started Yale the following year, majoring in psychology with a focus on trauma and recovery. Mom went back to school too, getting her degree in social work. We both wanted to help others trapped in similar situations. I became something of an expert on covert recording laws and admissible evidence, helping other abuse victims document their situations legally. I worked with legislators to push for better protection laws, using my story to illustrate how sophisticated abusers could be in their psychological manipulation. The videos, while not usable in court, became powerful educational tools with faces blurred and voices altered. Psychology professors used them to teach about gaslighting and coercive control. Police training programs included them to help officers recognize sophisticated abuse patterns. I wrote a book about the experience, The Camera's Truth, Surviving Systematic Gaslighting. Became a bestseller not because the story was unique, but because it was common. Thousands of people reached out to share their own experiences of being blamed for abuse they did not cause, of being weapons in their own torture. Dad wrote me letters from prison at first, still maintaining the narrative that I was a troubled child who had destroyed our perfect family. I never responded, but I kept them as reminders of how completely he believed his own lies. Or maybe he did not believe them, maybe it was just another manipulation tactic. With someone like him, it was impossible to know where the lies ended and delusion began. Mom and I testified at several other trials, expert witnesses on psychological abuse and trauma bonding. We met dozens of survivors, each with their own version of the same story, elaborate systems of control that made victims feel responsible for their own abuse. One woman, Sarah, had been convinced by her husband that she was possessed by demons that only emerged when she disappointed him, requiring exorcism through beating. Another, Jennifer, had been told that her children's souls were linked to her behavior, and any imperfection in her would damn them to hell. The creativity of cruelty was endless. But so was resilience. Every survivor we met was rebuilding, reclaiming their narratives, learning to trust their own perceptions again. We formed a support group that met monthly, sharing strategies for recovery, celebrating small victories like going a whole day without apologizing unnecessarily or making a decision without second-guessing ourselves. I graduated from Yale summa cum laude, my thesis on intergenerational trauma and systematic gaslighting winning the psychology department's highest honor. Mom was there, crying happy tears, finally able to celebrate an achievement without fear of retribution. Graduation, I thought about another graduation that might have been one where Dad sat in the audience, playing the proud father while calculating what violence my success would cause later. Instead, I stood there free, surrounded by chosen family, knowing that every achievement was mine alone, not tainted by false guilt or manipulated consequences. I went on to get my doctorate in clinical psychology, specializing in trauma recovery. My dissertation was on induced perpetrator guilt syndrome, the phenomenon of abuse victims who believe they caused the violence against themselves or others. It was groundbreaking work, built on the foundation of my own experience and those of hundreds of interview subjects. Mom became a victims advocate, working with domestic violence shelters to identify and address psychological abuse alongside physical violence. She developed screening tools to help identify victims of gaslighting who might not recognize their own abuse because they had been programmed to see themselves as the cause. We spoke at conferences together sometimes, the mother-daughter team who had survived elaborate psychological torture and exposed it through hidden cameras. It was re-traumatizing every time, but worth it when someone would approach us afterward and say, "I thought I was crazy. I thought it was my fault. Thank you for showing me the truth." Cameras had saved us in a way, not just as evidence, but as external validation of reality. When you have been gaslit for years, having objective proof that your perceptions are accurate is life-saving. Breaks the spell, shatters the false narrative, returns agency to the victim. I started dating in graduate school, carefully, slowly, with someone who understood trauma and recovery. Marcus was a fellow psychology student who had his own history with family violence. He understood why I needed to record our arguments, with his consent, to review later and make sure I was not being gaslit. He understood why certain phrases or tones could trigger panic attacks. He understood that trust was earned in millimeters over years, not given freely. When he proposed, it was in our apartment, with cameras recording, with both our knowledge, creating a moment of joy that was documented and real and could not be twisted into something else later. It was not romantic in a traditional sense, but it was perfect for us, a commitment witnessed by objective reality. Mom walked me down the aisle at our small wedding. Dad had been released by then, his sentence reduced for good behavior, but we had restraining orders in place and security at the venue. He did not try to come, though he sent a letter I did not read. Marcus and I had 2 children, raising them with radical honesty about emotions and consequences. We taught them that they were never responsible for adult emotions, that love should never hurt, that their feelings and perceptions were valid and important. When my daughter was 8, the age I was when the gaslighting began, she came home from school upset because a friend had said, "You made me so sad I hit my brother and it is your fault." "That is not true, sweetheart," I told her, holding her close. "No one else's actions are your fault. People are responsible for their own choices." "But," she said, "I know what she said. But it is not true. Someone hitting someone else is never your fault, no matter what anyone says." She looked at me with such trust, such certainty that I was telling her the truth. I thought about 8-year-old me, beginning to believe that my mother's pain was my responsibility, and felt both heartbreak for that child and fierce pride in breaking the cycle. Mom lived with us as the kids grew, a loving grandmother who had learned to laugh without looking over her shoulder, to make decisions without panic, to exist in her own skin peacefully. She dated occasionally but was happiest on her own, finally able to discover who she was without anyone else's definition. "I spent so many years being someone's wife, someone's victim, someone's accomplice," she said. "Now I am just Maria. That is enough." Dad tried to contact us a few times after his release. He had remarried, some poor woman who probably had no idea about his history and wanted to reconcile with his family. His letters were masterpieces of manipulation, alternating between taking responsibility without actually admitting anything specific, and subtly suggesting that maybe we had all misunderstood, maybe therapy had given us false memories, maybe we could start fresh if we were willing to let go of the past. I sent the letters to our lawyer, who sent cease and desist orders. When he persisted, we got the restraining orders extended. He eventually stopped, though I heard through professional networks that he was in therapy, claiming to be a victim of false accusations, maintaining his innocence to anyone who would listen. Part of me wondered if he actually believed his own lies by now, if he had repeated them so often they had become his truth. Or maybe he had always known exactly what he was doing, and the performance was just continuing. With master manipulators, it was impossible to tell where the mask ended and the real person began, if there was a real person at all. Kept the cameras from that time, those original tiny devices that had revealed the truth. They sat in a safety deposit box along with the notebooks, the photos, all the evidence of what had really happened. Not because I needed them anymore, but because their existence was proof that it had been real, that I had not imagined it, that truth existed independent of anyone's narrative about it. Sometimes, when working with clients who were being gaslit, I would tell them about the cameras. How they had showed me that reality existed outside my father's stories, that there was objective truth that could not be manipulated or twisted. "Document everything," I would tell them. Not for court, not for proof to others, but for yourself. For those moments when you start to believe the lies again. Reality exists. Truth exists. Your perceptions are valid. Many of them would cry when they first saw video or audio of their abuse, not because of the violence itself, but because it validated their reality. "It really happened," they would say. "I am not crazy. It really happened." The validation of external reality was sometimes the first step in breaking free from psychological manipulation. My son, at 16, once asked me why I had cameras all over our house, installed with everyone's knowledge and consent, recording public spaces only. "They make me feel safe," I told him honestly. knowing that reality is being recorded, that truth exists outside of anyone's interpretation of it. "That is sad, Mom," he said, not unkindly. "Yes," I agreed. "It is sad that I need them. But it is beautiful that I can have them, that I can choose to verify reality whenever I need to." He hugged me then, this child who had grown up safe and loved and never doubting his own perceptions. "I love you, Mom. And I believe you. Always." That was the gift we had given our children, the certainty that their reality was valid, their perceptions trustworthy, their experiences real. They would never have to question whether they were responsible for someone else's violence, never have to wonder if their memories were real, never have to install hidden cameras to prove they were not crazy. The cycle was broken. The gaslighting ended with me. Years later, I got a call from a detective in another state. Dad had been arrested again, this time for abusing his new wife. She had installed cameras after he had started the same pattern with her teenage daughter from a previous marriage, blaming the girl for violence against her mother. "She said she read your book," the detective told me. "She recognized the pattern and started recording everything. We have enough to put him away for a long time." I testified at that trial via video link, explaining the pattern, the methodology, the sophisticated nature of his psychological abuse. His new stepdaughter, brave at 15, testified about the growing guilt, the self-harm she had started, the way he made her feel responsible for her mother's bruises. "He said Mom only got hurt when I disappointed him," she said, crying on the stand. "He said I was killing her with my selfishness." The jury convicted him in less than an hour. Life without parole this time, the judge specifically cited the pattern of behavior, the fact that he had immediately resumed the same abuse tactics, the danger he posed to any family he might create. His new wife approached me after the trial, over video call, crying and apologizing for not believing our story initially. "He was so convincing," she said. "He told me you and your mother had conspired against him, that you were mentally ill, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. I believed him. I let him near my daughter. I am so sorry." "You do not need to apologize," I told her. "That is what he does. He creates believable narratives. The fact that you saw through it, that you protected your daughter, that is what matters." Her daughter was in therapy, working through the guilt and self-blame that had already taken root in just 2 years of manipulation. But she was young, resilient, and had a mother who believed her. She would recover faster than I had. That night, I watched the old videos one more time, not out of pain or trauma, but as a reminder of how far we had come. That girl installing cameras with shaking hands, terrified of being caught but more terrified of never knowing the truth. She had no idea she was saving not just herself and her mother, but potentially dozens of other victims who would recognize their own stories in hers. Cameras had been my rebellion, my refusal to accept the narrative being forced on me. They were proof that even in the deepest manipulation, some part of me knew the truth, fought for the truth, demanded evidence of the truth. Now at 45, I run a treatment center specifically for victims of psychological abuse and gaslighting. We use recording equipment therapeutically, helping clients document their reality and validate their experiences. The center is named Clear Lens, a reference to seeing reality without distortion. Mom, now in her 70s, still works there part-time, counseling other mothers who were made complicit in their children's psychological abuse. She has become something of a legend in the survivor community, the woman who survived decades of abuse and then helped expose one of the most sophisticated gaslighting operations ever documented. "Do you ever regret not leaving sooner?" a young mother asked her recently. "I regret that I did not know how," Mom replied. "I regret that I believed his lies. But I do not regret staying alive long enough to see him exposed, to see my daughter free, to help others escape. Sometimes survival is the most rebellious thing you can do." My children are adults now, both working in fields related to social justice and victim advocacy. They grew up understanding that truth matters, that reality is not subjective when it comes to abuse, that documentation and evidence are tools of liberation. My daughter, named Maria after her grandmother, is a documentary filmmaker who creates visual records of survivor stories. My son, David, is a lawyer specializing in domestic violence cases, particularly those involving psychological abuse and coercive control. You gave us purpose, Maria told me recently. Not trauma, but purpose. We grew up knowing that lies could be weapons and truth could be salvation. Cameras from my childhood are in a museum now, part of an exhibit on domestic violence and the evolution of survivor resources. Next to them are Dad's notebooks, his meticulous plans for psychological torture preserved behind glass as a warning and education. The exhibit includes a quote from my testimony. He made me believe I was the author of my mother's pain. Cameras showed me I was just another character in his fiction. Truth is not subjective. Violence is not caused by victims. And reality exists whether abusers acknowledge it or not. Thousands of people have visited the exhibit. Many leave notes in the comment book. I thought it was my fault for 20 years. My mother still believes she caused the abuse. Thank you for showing me I am not crazy. The cameras saved my life too. Each note is a reminder that my story is not unique, that psychological abuse and gaslighting are epidemic, that victims everywhere are struggling to trust their own perceptions against narratives designed to destroy them. Dr. Martinez, my first therapist, now in her 80s, still sends me updates on new research in trauma and recovery. She recently published a paper on what she calls the chin pattern, the specific type of triangulated abuse where one victim is made to feel responsible for violence against another. Your case changed how we understand psychological abuse, she wrote. It showed us that gaslighting can be systematic, documented, and deliberate. It gave us language for something victims had been experiencing but could not articulate. The academic recognition is validating, but what matters more are the emails I get from survivors who recognize their own experiences in mine. My stepfather did the same thing, making me think Mom's bruises were because of my grades. I installed cameras after reading your book. I have proof now. I am not crazy. My daughter was cutting herself because she thought she caused my injuries. Your story saved us both. Each message is proof that breaking silence creates ripples, that one person's truth can validate another's reality, that documentation and evidence are powerful tools against gaslighting. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had never installed those cameras. Would I still believe it was my fault? Would Mom have survived his escalating violence? Would Dad have continued his pattern with new families, new daughters to weapon against new wives? But I did install them. Something in me, some spark of rebellion or desperation for truth, made me hide those tiny devices in our home. They became windows into reality, showing me that truth existed outside my father's elaborate fiction. Cameras did not just record abuse, they recorded the manufacture of false reality. They showed how lies could be constructed, rehearsed, and performed until they seemed more real than truth. They revealed the mechanics of gaslighting in a way that no testimony alone could have captured. Now, when I train new therapists in recognizing psychological abuse, I show them excerpts from those videos. I watch their faces change as they realize how deliberate it all was, how calculated, how cruel. This is what gaslighting looks like, I tell them. Not just lying, but creating an entire false reality and forcing victims to live in it. Your clients are not crazy. They are not overreacting. They are responding normally to abnormal situations designed to destroy their sense of reality. The young therapists always ask the same question. How do we help them trust reality again? Evidence, I answer. Documentation. External validation. And most importantly, believing them. Be the solid ground they can stand on while they relearn to trust their own perceptions. My life's work has become helping others find their solid ground, their evidence, their truth. Every client who learns to trust their own perceptions again is a victory against the kind of systematic gaslighting my father perfected. Mom and I often reflect on our journey over tea in her garden, this peaceful space she has created full of flowers and life. We talk about the bad times less now, focusing more on the present, on the families we have helped, the cycles we have seen broken. Do you think he ever loved us? She asked recently, a question she returns to periodically. I think he loved controlling us, I answered. I think he loved the power, the manipulation, the game of it all. Whether that counts as love is above my pay grade. She nodded, sipping her tea. I loved him once, before I knew what he was. Or maybe I loved who I thought he was. That was not your fault either, I reminded her. He was very good at creating false realities. You fell in love with a fiction. The cameras showed us the truth, she said. But you know what? Even without them, some part of me knew. Some part of me always knew it was wrong. That part is what saved us, I said. The part that knew despite everything telling us otherwise. As I write this, another news story has broken about a father using his children to psychologically torture his wife. Pattern is depressingly familiar. Blame the kids for violence against the mother, make everyone complicit in their own abuse, create a false reality where victims become perpetrators in their own minds. But this time, the oldest child had read my book. She installed cameras. She documented everything. She saved her family with evidence and truth, breaking the cycle before it could fully take hold. Her mother sent me a message. Your story gave my daughter permission to trust her own perceptions. The cameras gave us proof, but your courage gave us hope. This is the legacy of those tiny cameras hidden in my childhood home, not just that they recorded truth, but that they proved truth could be recorded, that reality existed outside of anyone's narrative about it, that evidence could shatter even the most elaborate lies. Every survivor who installs a camera, who keeps a journal, who records a conversation, who documents their reality is refusing to live in someone else's fiction. They are insisting that truth matters, that their perceptions are valid, that reality is not subjective when it comes to abuse. Cameras gave me back my sanity. They showed me that I was not responsible for my mother's pain, that violence was not my fault, that the guilt I carried was manufactured and installed like malware in my mind. They revealed the truth that set us free. Now, decades later, I help others find their own truth, their own evidence, their own freedom from false narratives. Every client who learns to trust reality again, every family that breaks the cycle of psychological abuse, every child who grows up knowing their perceptions are valid, they are all part of the ripple effect that started with those hidden cameras. My name is Sophia Chen. I was gaslit for 10 years to believe I caused my mother's abuse. Hidden cameras revealed it was all a lie, an elaborate psychological torture designed to control us both. Those cameras saved our sanity, our lives, and ultimately the lives of countless others who recognized their own stories in ours. To anyone reading this who doubts their own perceptions, who has been told their reality is wrong, who carries guilt for someone else's violence, document everything. Trust your instincts. Reality exists outside of what anyone tells you it is. The truth is real, provable, and powerful enough to shatter any lie, no matter how elaborate or long believed. You are not crazy. You are not responsible for someone else's violence. And you deserve to live in reality, not someone else's fiction. Cameras proved it. Now I spend my life proving it to others, one survivor at a time, one broken cycle at a time, one validated reality at a time. That is the power of truth against gaslighting. That is the liberation in evidence. That is why, no matter how painful it was to discover, I will forever be grateful for what those cameras revealed. They showed me I was not guilty. I was never guilty. And neither are you. Thank you for listening to my story. I have left 2 more stories on your screen. Click on whichever one resonates with your heart. And if you want to join our sisterhood of survivors who refuse to stay silent, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember, your voice is your power, and it is never too late to use it.